In this video, we will draw insights from the late sociologist Robert Bellah and his essay he published in 1967 entitled Civil Religion in America. Civil religion, in Bellah's words, is, quote, I would argue that civil religion at its best is a genuine apprehension of universal and transcendent religious reality as seen in, or one could almost say, as revealed through the experiences of the American people. Civil religion has a religious dimension expressed in a set of beliefs, symbols, and rituals. It is also genuinely American and new. The notion of God is absolutely central in civil religion, just as it is in Christianity and Judaism. We find such references to God in phrases such as "in God we trust" or "under God." Invoking God in national speeches, for example, we find the president's inaugural speech constituting an important ritual in civil religion. Here, the president swears by God to uphold the Constitution, and ultimate sovereignty has been attributed to God. Appealing to God provides a transcendent goal for the political process and highlights an obligation to carry out God's will on earth. John F. Kennedy, for example, stated, quote, here on God's earth, work must truly be our own, end quote. For Kennedy and the American people, it is about carrying out God's will on earth and to make America a light to all nations. There is also a biblical ring to what is said, in that behind civil religion there exist biblical archetypes such as the Exodus, chosen people, the promised land, New Jerusalem, sacrificial death, and rebirth. America, as we will see, is seen as the new Israel. George Washington is seen as Moses, Abraham Lincoln as the suffering Christ figure. Civil religion also has its own prophets and its own martyrs, its own sacred events, sacred places, rituals, and symbols. The civil religion ideology, argues Bellah, was the motivating spirit of those who founded America and has been present in every generation since. Important to note is that despite all the biblical references, civil religion is not specifically Christianity, although some of its notions derive from the Christian religion. In civil religion, for example, we find no direct mention of Jesus Christ. Further, the God of civil religion is related to order, law, and right, and, as noted, has a special concern for America. The equating of America with Israel is not infrequent. Here, America is seen as a promised land to which God has led his people to establish a new sort of social order. According to Bellah, civil religion serves as a genuine vehicle of national self-understanding. Also importantly, while not Christianity, civil religion was also not considered by most of the early American presidents as a substitute for Christianity. Churches were neither to control the state or be controlled by it, although they had a wide sphere of piety and social action. The idea of God played an important role in the thought of the early American statesmen, such as Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson. For instance, we find civil religion in Benjamin Franklin, especially in his Washington farewell address. He notes how for political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. He claims that morality cannot be maintained without religion. He states that, quote, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle, end quote. We find more civil religion in the Declaration of Independence that makes 4 references to God. For example, we find, quote, the laws of nature and nature's God, end quote. Another quote, all men are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, end quote. There is also in the Declaration of Independence a supreme judge of the world, as well as a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. These are obviously biblical influence. There are obviously biblical influences in the Declaration of Independence. For example, of God being the judge of the world. According to Bellah, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were the so-called sacred scriptures of civil religion. The reference to God here means that God has been a central symbol in civil religion from the beginning and remains so today. But what is meant by God in civil religion? This is not obvious because there is no formal creed in civil religion itself. We find reference to God in George Washington's first inaugural speech and address in 1789. It is worth extracting from this address a lengthy quote as a sign of civil religion. Washington states that, quote, It would be improper to omit in this first official act my fervent supplications to that Almighty Being who rules over the universe, who presides in the council of all of nations, and whose providential aid can supply every deficit, that his benediction may consecrate to the liberties and happiness of the people of the United States. No people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which conducts the affairs of man more than those of the United States. By every step by which we have advanced to the character of an independent nation seems to have been distinguished by some token of providential agency. The propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal laws of order and right which heaven itself ordained. End quote. Washington later claimed that there should be a day of public thanksgiving and prayer, which became the first Thanksgiving Day under the Constitution. According to Bellah, Thanksgiving Day serves to integrate the family into civil religion. Now turning to Jefferson's second inaugural address, we find him stating that, quote, "I shall need, too, the favor of that being in whose hands we are, who led our fathers, as Israel of old, from their native land and planted them in a country flowing with all the necessaries and comforts of life." Here, America is again seen as the promised land. Bellah maintains that the words and acts of the founding fathers and of the first few presidents shaped civil religion ever since. In Bellah's words, quote, what we have then from the earliest years of the Republic is a collection of beliefs, symbols, and rituals with respect to sacred things. More recently, we have the appeal of President Johnson, who stated the following on March 15, 1965, before Congress to ask for a strong voting rights bill. Quote, "God will not favor everything that we do. It is rather our duty to divine his will. I cannot help but believe that he truly understands and that he really favors the undertaking that we begin here tonight." At every point here, it's clear that civil religion is open in that it's non-sectarian. It doesn't specifically mention any specific religion, although its themes are clearly derived from biblical Christianity. We must also note civil religion in the Civil War. Bellah identifies the importance of the Civil War in American history, as it was the second great event to involve the national self-understanding that became expressed in civil religion. Before the Civil War, American civil religion focused on the event of the Revolution. The Revolution was seen as the final act of the exodus from the old lands across the waters, and Washington was seen as the divinely appointed Moses who led his people out of the lands of tyranny. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were the sacred scriptures to emerge from this period. The Civil War, moreover, was significant for Americans because it was one of the bloodiest wars of the 19th century in which many lost their lives. The war raised the deepest questions of national meaning, and it was Abraham Lincoln who symbolized its meaning for Americans. It is here, according to Bellah, that the themes of death, sacrifice, and rebirth entered civil religion, which became symbolized in the life of Lincoln. We must also note the civil religion in the Gettysburg Address, which also became a part of civil religion's scriptures. The Gettysburg Address makes use of birth images and Christian symbolism, such as, quote, brought forth, conceived, created, and a new birth of freedom, end quote. But the Christian symbolism here is not sectarianism, in that it does not have anything to do with the church or a specific religion itself. Turning again to the symbolism of Lincoln, we find deep religious symbolism within him. William Herndon, Lincoln's law partner and biographer, stated the following of him. Quote, "For 50 years God rolled Abraham Lincoln through his fiery furnace. He did it to try Abraham and to purify him for his purposes. This made Mr. Lincoln humble, tender, forbearing, sympathetic to suffering, kind, sensitive, tolerant, broadening, deepening, and widening his whole nature, making him the noblest and loveliest character since Jesus Christ. I believe Lincoln was God's chosen one." Lincoln was also linked to the war dead, who were those who gave their last full measure of devotion. Here the theme of sacrifice was written into civil religion and soon found both physical and ritualistic expression. The great number of war dead required the establishment of a number of national cemeteries, such as the Gettysburg National Cemetery and the Arlington National Cemetery. The Arlington National Cemetery has become the most hallowed monument in civil religion. There is also Memorial Day that grew out of the Civil War and gave ritual expression to religious themes. This day involves a rededication to the martyr dead, the spirit of sacrifice, and the American vision. Memorial Day and Thanksgiving Day are two holidays that provide an annual ritual calendar for civil religion.